Amen. All right, so I guess that juicy little place I was going to go next has to wait till next week, which is okay. All right, so I hope this is making sense. I hope we ever clarified a whole bunch of stuff. I know it was a little bit tough because some of the things required longer teachings, but I have those teachings. You know which ones I mentioned today. Are you saved? Do you know the Father and the Son? Understanding the Ruach. Discovering your identity. What else did I cover? What? Making decisions, the reason you exist. Thank you. So I think that was all of the ones I mentioned. Okay, Gadol class students, you should be writing those down and make sure you know them in case I quiz you on them. Okay, so this is the part we call the afterburn. So if you have got comments or questions on the teaching, you can raise your hands and we'll have a microphone come around. Maurice is going to come and grab the mic. Okay, if you are on live stream, we've got Rob Wines going to get the live stream questions and comments. Please keep them to what I talked about today. Please do not be mad at me if I refer you to a teaching rather than answer your question. Because some of your questions will be better answered in an extensive teaching rather than in a 2-minute quick answer, okay? So please be okay with that. If you really want the answer. I mean, if you just want a soundbite, well, I'm sorry about that. But if you really want the answer, it may require you to make the effort to listen to a few hours of teaching to get it. Now remember, I don't sell them, so it's not like I want to get you to, I just want, that to me is the best way to give you the answer sometimes, is to tell you, Father and the Son teaches 11 parts. You need to hear all 11 parts of that. Understanding the Ruach, I don't remember. What's it, 7 or 8 parts, or whatever it is? 8, okay? You need to listen to that. If you want to understand the subject matter, at least if you understand where I'm coming from. Because I can't give it to you in a soundbite. The grace teaching, I didn't name it, but we talked quite a bit about that in Romans, under the search for the doctrine of grace. 14 parts. Don't be afraid of it. It took that long to explain it correctly. Okay, or I should say correctly, I don't want to sound arrogant. It took that long to explain my point and my position thoroughly. Okay? The what? Oh, it ended too soon? Oh, okay, 14 parts is all you get. Now, what are you, just like brother, like sister? I'm being tag teamed by brother and sister here. She wanted more grace, and he's like, oh, when I said no. Okay. Now, as your sort of virtual father, knock it off. Okay. And that's only because I literally am, that's not like I think I'm like a father to everybody, but I've kind of adopted them. Okay. Afterburn, take 2. All right. Who's going to start us off with a comment or question? Okay, Candace, go ahead.
Okay. When I was in the Christian church, the fruit in here that we were reading about, bearing fruit, I got the opinion that they were talking about bringing souls in. Go knock doors and stuff like that, bring souls in. But what I'm getting from what you're teaching, the fruit would be more like the life-changing attitudes that are in us that become more like Yeshua?
Correct. And it's not just the attitude, it's the behaviors. That includes Torah observance. So it's the 2 great commands. The fruit will be you're going to be loving him more by doing what he wants us to do to show our love to him. And then you'll be doing loving each other more by doing the Torah parts that have to do with loving each other. So it's about the fruit of the changing from what we are to what he is through the walking out of the halakha of Torah. Okay? And that's why he links it to, if you love me, you'll keep my commands. Guard after the commands. Now, we didn't read that in John 14, but the whole giving of the Ruach starts with the verse that says, if you love me, guard my commands, and then, if you do that, I will send you the Ruach. People usually think, oh, we get the Spirit first. No. He says, if you love me, you'll guard my commands, and then I will send you the Spirit. Because then what the Spirit's going to do is tell you how those commands play out and why they're important and how you're to apply them and how it transforms you. Until you understand the material, there's no need for the Ruach at that point. Put the material in and the Ruach helps piece it together for you. Who's next?
Hey, Rabbi, I had a quick question. On in John 15, verse 25, it says, but the word might be fulfilled but that the word might be fulfilled, which was written in their Torah.
Oh, I knew somebody was going to say that. I forgot to mention it. Okay.
Can you expound on
Well,
there?
because he happens to be talking to a group of people that are dealing in the Jewish community. Okay? And so sometimes it's like when Yahweh says to Moses, your people that you brought out of Egypt. So here Yeshua is saying their Torah. In other words, they should know better. It's in the book. Okay? He said, if I did not do among them, I was talking about the Jewish people specifically here, okay? And he said, the works which no one else did, they would have no sin. But now they have both seen and have hated both me and my Father, but that the word might be fulfilled as written in their book. It's in their book. They know it. Okay? So it's not that the Torah is theirs, and that's where Christians maybe get the mistake of saying, well, that's the Jewish stuff. No. He was using that kind of a literary sort of way, a writing choice to make the point, just like when Yahweh says to Moses, well, your people that you took out of Egypt, because they weren't his people, and Moses didn't do the taking, right? He just did the leading. But he's trying to make a point. So here, I think, and I actually have it circled in my book to kind of cover that, and I didn't get to do that. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Okay, because remember, he's talking specifically about this group of people that are about to go ahead and kill him. And he said that they have seen, they've hated me without a cause. Dawid?
I had a comment, a thought that I was basically dealing with, because you were talking about the entire journey and the plan of Abba, how they would mess this up and they would basically, to a certain extent, fall. And then the nations would be drawn in because of that, and then they'd get jealous and get back in. And that we weren't supposed to be arrogant and this, that, and the other, being of the nations. The thought was basically that what surprises us doesn't necessarily surprise him. He's never on the defensive. He's always on the offensive, because that's what he's, not saying that he's offensive, but you know.
No, he's proactive.
Yeah, he's proactive. Right. And so we shouldn't be surprised necessarily, because he's never surprised by anything that happens. Anything that comes against us that is a surprise to us, well, it's not a surprise to him. He knew this was happening. He either caused it or allowed it.
Exactly. Okay? Look, he knew that this particular time frame that the Jewish people in Israel were going to reject Yeshua, because he was not going to do what they wanted him to do at that time. Okay? And in that rejection, it opened the doors to spring the message to those who would receive it. And that was the beginning with the Gentiles. And we see how that has grown over the years and centuries. And Judah was not ready for that message. They're still not ready for that message in a big way. I mean, small parts of them, I don't mean in a big way like big time. I mean, like the majority of them are not ready for that message, okay? But there's some, like myself, okay, who are ready for the message. Okay, who's next? Are we back at the live stream? Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, from Janet Hoffman. If not everyone whose eyes are open receive him, should we then pray for those hearts to receive him, or is this an individual decision that cannot be affected by prayer?
I'll go with probably a little of both. Look, we can pray for everybody to because that's our heart's desire. We want everybody to get it, especially those who we love and we're friends with and we're family members with, etc. But recognize that that's just us expressing to our Father what we feel. Prayer is not magic. It's not manipulation. It doesn't pressure Abba. He's still going to do what he's going to do. But it does express to him where your heart's at. I think he likes to hear that we have a lot of compassion, a lot of love and concern and desire for all those we know to come into truth. But it's not like if we hit critical mass and have enough prayer, it forces his hand. He's going to heal who he heals. He's going to open eyes who he opens eyes. He's going to do whatever he does. He's going to do what he does. So do I think our prayers in general from that point? No. Now it says the prayers of a righteous man avail a lot. There's an effectiveness there. But the righteous man is going to be coming from in that case, we're talking about a very much more high level, like a tzaddik. He's coming from a different place. He sees the bigger picture. His prayers are going to be more in line with what he sees the Father doing. But again, we have to be careful. We don't think of it as this sort of, he has to do what we want. And I think that comes through Christianity quite a bit. That whole idea of Messiah being your personal Messiah. Okay, and I've often said he's not your personal anything. You're his personal something. He bought and paid for you. Right? Okay? All right, any other questions?
From question 2 from Janet Hoffman. Also, what did Yeshua mean when he said, "You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you"? He's referring to John 15:3.
I have no idea. Next question. Now look, remember we're talking about here in this idea is he's talking about that part, he's talking about status, right? He's saying every branch in me, that's sort of a status, or a branch in him. But that branch in him is not a status that's like a once saved, always saved status. It's just a status of when you covenant, you're a branch in him. But you could choose to break it. And he says, you are already clean. Clean is a status. We call that tahor. There's also a status called tameh, unclean. He said, but you are already clean because of the Torah, because of the word which I've spoken to you. He says, in other words, I've already cleaned you up. I've already set you on the right path. Now you are in the every branch in me category. So because of that, stay in me. Remember, that you already clean comes in between the every branch in me and the stay in me. So he wants to make sure that he's talking to his disciples and says to them, so it's clear you're in this already every branch in me category. You are in that category. You are clean because of the word. Now that you know that you're clean, you're tahor, stay in me. Okay, next question.
All right, from Sean, and in John 15:22, Yeshua says, if I had not come and spoken to them, they would have no sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. Is he referring to when he spoke at Mount Sinai?
No, he's talking about specifically this particular group of people that are about to reject him and kill him. This is the hated me without a cause thing. This is remember, this is happening right before, he's about to get killed. And so we have, if you go back to chapter 13, this is all happening between Passover, coming to that Last Supper, right? The Last Supper is in chapter 13. And all of this stuff that's happening here is leading up to his last prayer in chapter 17 and them coming to get him in 18. So this is happening in a very tight window. He's making some comments, last-minute comments to his students to understand the society and the people that he's been dealing with up to this point and their consequences and what he's expecting then of his disciples. So remember, context is always important, always key. And so the context is that if you have to know when this is happening. Remember, context is who's speaking? Yeshua. Who's he talking to? His disciples. It's not like an open-air discussion, okay? He's talking to his disciples because this is after the Last Supper. This is as we're leading into Passover. So this is all happening in a very tight window from the night before Passover till Passover. So this is all happening in 24 hours. Okay? This is happening really quick. Actually, it's happening quicker than that. When you think about it, he had the Last Supper, and then he goes through all these discussions, and then he's talking about people staying up with him, and he's talking about all these other last things. This is all quick stuff. And so it's in the context of, you guys, I'm preparing you for what's about to happen to me, and for you to think correctly about those who are about to do this to me. So don't get so mad at them. This was planned and prophesied to happen, that they would do this. Just like when he said to Judas, do what you do it quickly. He knew who was going to do it. He knew what was going to happen. He had no surprises. Like that we'd said, no surprises, right? And he could have known that Judas was going to do it and said, somebody tie him down, he's not going to do it, He knew exactly what he was going to do. It had to be done. And by it had to be done, meaning they already know the end from the beginning. He already knew that's how this happens. This story plays out this way, and anything you do to stop it will not get you to the end place that they all wanted to actually get to. Okay? I hate to use, maybe this is a really terrible analogy. Okay? But maybe it's a great analogy. Some of you are going to be mad at this, but I'm not going to ask you to raise hands, but a lot of you watched Infinity Wars. Okay, you watched Avengers Infinity War. And in that movie, at the end, Doctor Strange went through, using his little time stone, every scenario he could think of that could play out for the decision that would be made at that moment, and what kind of end result it would play out as it played out into a future. And realized there was only one that worked. But that's Yahweh. I'm not saying he's Doctor Strange. Yahweh has seen and can see at all times all of it. If this happens, then the next thing, it's kind of like playing chess, right? You have to think, if I do this, what is the person next going to do? You're not always sure. Yahweh is always sure. He knows if I do this, you'll do that. If this person does that, then they'll do this, and knows where it ends up. Okay? You know, it's kind of like a phrase that I tried to say, I think I said it last night, butchered a bunch of times, which is, if you're not careful, you'll end up where you're going. Okay? But because you're already headed somewhere. But Abba has the ability to see all of that play out and know exactly where it's headed. So if anybody had intervened with Rehoboam and Jeroboam, it would have been a different result, playing out a whole different way. That wasn't the way Abba wanted it to play out, so he said, leave them alone. This is of me. Right? Okay? The same thing is happening with Judas. Yeshua could have stopped him anytime he wanted to. When they arrested him, he said, I could call a legion of angels to come down. But then it wouldn't have played out the way it needed to play out. This is the one scenario that gets the results Yahweh wants. So he doesn't really get involved in too many parts of it unless he's making sure that it continues on the timeline he wants. And he knows how each person is going to react along that timeline. Does it make sense? So the only reason I use that movie analogy, because that's essentially what that character was doing. Was saying, if this happens, what happens next? If this happens, what happens next? To try to find any possible way of having it play out that there's a chance that it could work. And then he said, I only found one. But it didn't look like it made any sense, because he actually looks like he's doing something dumb. He gives up the stone and everything, whatever. But he said, but this is the only one that works. Well, guess what? In this scenario, the only way this works is Yeshua had to come. He had to die. All of us wish that wasn't necessary, but it was. And in it, a lot of other awful things had to happen. But apparently it was necessary to ultimately get to that place in the end where it all works right. And so hopefully that we can understand that, and then we can embrace. So when we're looking at these things play through, let's just understand that this is in context right when this is happening. So it's not that who's talking, who's he talking, etc., but what is actually happening at this moment. This is that moment between the Last Supper and the arrest. There's not a lot of time in there, okay, between the Last Supper and his arrest. Because in chapter 18, he gets arrested. Okay, chapter 13, we're having the Last Supper. Not a lot that's a lot of stuff, conversation happening in a short window. So he's trying to get them ready for what's coming. And he knows they're not ready for it, because he's told them over and over again, they're going to arrest me, they're going to kill me, everything else, and they're still not getting it. They're just not. Because in their head, he's Mashiach the way they think he should be. Kingdom's coming now. He's going to destroy the Romans and free us from everybody, like the Egyptian one. The plagues are going to come flying down. We're all going to win, and that's it. But that's not what he came to do this time. Next time is another story. Everything that they had hoped for, and then some. Okay? Next question.
From Crystal McGee. Is it oversimplifying Romans 11, verse 6, by saying favor is favor, work is work, don't turn one into the other, otherwise both are meaningless?
I'll go with that. That'll work. That'll work. And thank you for doing the favor. Okay. No, that's not oversimplifying it. I think that's important. You know, it's Paul that doesn't do us any favors by using the language he uses to make the points he makes. Okay? And I think it would make a lot more sense if we were reading it in Hebrew the way he originally probably wrote it. Okay, but translating it through Greek and then English, etc., did not help us any. Okay? Because remember, each one is trying to take a possible... Look, there's a time when work can mean toil and effort. There's a time where work can mean doing a work, you know, doing something that produces something, okay? So the Greek word here can be translated in multiple different ways, and we have to choose the right way. Well, guess what? Every translator's had to make those choices, and they are making it through their experience and their understanding at the time. And so I don't think any of them were probably doing anything, you know, insidious or nefarious to cause a problem. They were just doing it thinking they were making it say what it's supposed to say. But they only could filter it through their understanding at the time. Now, we have an advantage to the person who originally translated Romans. That person probably did not have the entirety of all this. They didn't have the whole scriptures. And so they couldn't actually make sure that whatever their translation was would be consistent with what everything else says. In other words, the translator would not necessarily know what it can't say. And by the way, figuring out what something can't say is probably not only as important, maybe even more important than figuring out what it does say. Because then you'll have a much better shot of getting it right, what it does say, once you realize what it can't say. Like when people come to me and say, well, Paul said blah, 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 and I always look them in the eye and say, fine, if that's true, then he's a heretic, you need to throw him out. Because if you're going to tell me that Paul did away with the law and said you could do this and that and all this other stuff, fine, if that's true, because that's out of bounds with the rest of the book, then he's a heretic, throw him out. Or, just maybe, you're not understanding him correctly. I prefer the second one. I prefer to believe that Paul knew exactly what he was talking about, was not a heretic, and just confused the you-know-what out of us because he was speaking to people that only understood exactly what he was talking about. Because I don't think Paul had one thought in his head that you and I would ever read the letter to the Romans, or Galatians, or Corinthians, or any other letter he wrote. Those are private letters between him and his group, and he probably never thought anybody other than those groups. As a matter of fact, I'm sure he never thought that the Corinthians would read the letter to the Galatians and vice versa. There were letters to particular groups, private letters, of which we're gleaning all kinds of wonderful stuff out of them. I get that. But I don't think Paul ever thought this was going to become doctrine, you know, quote unquote. What else you got?
Okay, from LaDonna, Yeshua said, if we seek him with all our hearts and we find him, does this not have a bearing on why those still in the denominational churches are still blind? No,
look, the seeking him, a lot of you sought him and found the denominational churches as an answer to your seeking him. The opening up the eyes is just him deciding when you're ready and who's ready and when. That's his choice. He understands, he knows. And a lot of you have said, I don't know why he picked me when he did. I can say the same thing. I don't know why he picked me when he did. You know, I'm chugging along. I'm a college kid. I'm in my early 20s. I don't know why he picked me when he did. But he did. Okay? And that was, I promise you that, actually, this is going to be a good example. You said about asking and seeking and desiring. He called me and showed me at a moment when I wanted to find him. But I didn't want to find him because I just desired to find him. I wanted to find him because I needed answers I wasn't finding. In other words, back to the journey video. He poked me and disturbed my peace, and then I responded with acting in that I don't want to say aggressive, but I was very actively wanting to get answers. So yes, from that point of view, he still initiates it with the poke, with the disturbing of your peace. Then you, if you respond with the, I need to know, I need an answer, this itch that I can't scratch, I need to get that is part of the process, okay? He wants to see how well you respond. He may disturb your peace and you go, I don't care, okay? And some of you know people like that. You know he disturbed their peace and they don't care. Don't judge them. Sad. So yes, I think he does give a certain amount of response to how the level of our response, but we're still responding to something he did. It's not us just, what prompted you, the person who ever wrote this question, what prompted you to seek him so actively? Go back another level. Oh, because he did something in your life that made you need to have a more relationship. Get answers, seek him, whatever it was. That peace-disturbing moment. Okay? Next question.
From Cheryl W., would the love we show to or feel for the Father be defined differently than the love we feel for another person? Is it measured by our joy in obedience to him?
Look, you're always going to have a difference in how you feel about someone you can physically touch, see, and interact with than the invisible Elohim. You can't possibly feel the same. So I'm not saying what the right way is to be and which way it is, but we are given physical bodies with 5 senses, and they're stimulated through sound and sight and taste and touch and all these other things, right? So that's different than this relationship with one that we cannot see and physically interact with. So I can't say that we express love in the same way to both. It's not going to be that way. The love we have to the Father comes from an appreciation of giving us hope, answers, interventions in our life, the small miracles, the great miracles that help us get through life, and then we have a love. Remember, go back to Deuteronomy 10:12. Hey, we haven't used the Deuteronomy 10:12 in a while. Right? It says, and now Israel, what does Yahweh want of you? But to fear him and to walk in all his ways. And then it says, and to love him. Why? Because when you fear him and walk in his ways, you discover how much he loves you. And so then you start to love him. The way I feel about my wife and the way that love developed was from a whole different perspective. Okay, there was a physical attraction, then there was an intellectual and emotional attraction as we spent time together. It's a whole different type of thing. We found certain things in common and we developed, spent time together. It's different than you would do with Yahweh, okay? So that's why we have 2 great commands, to love him and to love each other. We don't love each other and love him in the same exact way. It comes out in different ways. So that's why Yeshua says, I want you to love each other as I have loved you. See, he came in the flesh. We see what it looked like. We see how he gave of himself. That was one of the reasons he had to come in the flesh, so we could see what that would look like, instead of just dealing with the invisible. Does it make sense? Okay? So it's not going to come out the same. Your love for each other is going to have a very different look in a lot of ways than your love for your Creator. All right, next question. You guys are asking tough ones today.
From Marianne Gibson, do I continue to pray for my broken family?
Of course. You can pray for anything. What you don't want to pray for is those that are in abject rebellion. That was what we read the other week. We're talking about those that are actively in rebellion. He says, don't pray to them. He said, I'm not going to listen. Okay? So those that you know better and are actively rebelling, you could pray Abba to be, somewhat merciful in his punishments, but you really want to pray, just pray that they see what they need to see and learn what they need to learn so they fix it. Okay? But don't pray against the punishment, the chastisement, and the consequences. But as far as your broken family, if everybody that you know that's not covenanted, pray fervently for them, that their eyes would be open, it would change their lives, just like it did for you. Okay? And all that brokenness can be healed. The only time he tells us not to pray is if someone is in rebellion and praying against their consequences. All right? Now, if they're in rebellion, pray that they come out of rebellion. But don't pray for anything that has to do with their consequences. Oh, Father, take away their consequences. They're really good people. They blah, 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 blah. Like, you know what? You don't know anything about all that stuff. Abba, I pray that they learn what they need to learn and fix what they need to fix. Okay? Does that make sense? Is that fair? There's nobody you can't pray for. It's just about how you do it that makes the difference. How about I make it that way? All right? There is nobody you can't pray for Just what you're praying for will be different depending on what they're doing and how they ended up where they ended up. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's not ask any more questions about, can I pray for this or can I pray for that person? Pray for everybody. Just don't pray against the plan of what Yahweh's already laid in place. Don't pray against his will. That's why he says, if you stay in me and I in you, then you'll ask things correctly and things will be done. Because you'll know what to ask. It'll be in the right framework. That's what he was saying in John 15. Okay, go ahead.
This is from Norma Silva. She's relating it back to Janet Hoffman's first question. It's talking about those that reject him now, are they still going to have another opportunity?
All right, he was specifically talking about those people. Let's not do and I'm not picking on you, let's not do the Christian thing where we take stuff that was for specific people and globalize it, okay? The only way to globalize that piece is that if you were in full understanding and that you are fully open and aware, and then you choose to reject, you're in probably some deep trouble. And I'm not at a high enough pay grade to decide whether you get a chance, another chance, or what chance you even had in the first place. Because when you say another chance, we don't know what kind of chance they've already had or not. We're making assumptions, okay? Let's all understand that we all suffer from a psycho-emotional dysfunction. It's called filling in blanks when we don't have answers, so we just do it ourselves. That is a psycho-emotional dysfunction. It will cause you all kinds of issues in all your relationships. Recognize that you know a lot less about everything than you think you do. When you see somebody doing something, you know very little about what they're doing, why they're doing it, what's driving it. Don't guess. Don't make assumptions. Even if they tell you, you still don't really know, because they may not really know what's driving them. Always come from the place like forgive them, Father, they don't know what they're doing, I don't know what they're doing, whatever it is. Now, Yeshua knew what they were doing, but he said, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Okay? Let's not be trying to figure out. See, everybody loves to focus on these verses, and I'm not picking on you, that talk about if you reject him, if you do this, if you do that, then you're toast. Everybody's afraid they're going to be toast. Stop worrying about that. Make every effort to do what you need to do with your hope and trust that it will be pleasing in his sight. Now we get Deuteronomy 8:2 in it, all right? That he's looking to see if it's in your heart to make the effort. Are you going to show it's in your heart to keep his commandments or not? Oh, but I mess them up all the time. Yes, but does it bother you? Yes, well, that's good. When it stops bothering you, that's bad. Okay? When your disobedience no longer bothers you, you're probably in a lot of trouble. Am I clear with that? You are going to mess up, but it needs to bother you when you mess up, and not so much that you get so depressed and beat yourself up, but that you get determined to stand up and fix it and do it right the next time. Some of you are that way with your silly little video games. Well, I didn't get 3 stars. I'm going to keep playing it until I get 3 stars. So you look at it as a failure when you get 2 or 1. And you're going to keep doing it. Do that in your life with everything. Don't beat yourself up because you fell short. Get up and do it again. Get up and fix it. Get up and make adjustments. Learn from the effort. In some ways, I'm going to say this to everybody. In some ways, video games are the worst thing that was ever invented. But in some ways, they're actually good. You know why? Because I've watched certain children who play games have no more fear of losing. Because you lose all the time, and that's how you get good. That's a great lesson. Society's trying to take that lesson away. Everybody wins. When you play video games, guess what? You don't win most of the time until you lose enough to learn and make a mistake and learn and make a mistake and learn. Then you get good at it. Okay? I watched with my 2 children, not picking on them. My son played a lot of video games when he was a little bit younger, much more than my daughter did. So when I would play something with my daughter and she would lose, she would flip out. Like most little kids do. My son would lose, no big deal, let's play again. Lose all the time. Then she started playing more video games. Not that I'm advocating video games, I'm just making a point. And she lost much more often and realized that she got good. The more she lost, the more she got better. She no longer flips out when she loses. Because they learn that losing is not the problem. It's what do you do next? Did you learn something? And out of the seeds of that failure in your mind, you may see it as failure, are the seeds of the success that's coming. And so let's realize that as you go forward. So when it comes to these questions, we're all afraid. Listen, Christianity did this to you. They brainwashed you and they screwed up your heads to make you afraid that you're going to do something that dooms you. Stop that. Okay? I can't find verses in here that tells you if you do blah, 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 you're doomed. Okay? That's Christianity's lever to make you afraid and to make you do things their way. He's all about the effort. Do you want to get it right? You know when I'll be concerned? When you stop wanting to get it right. When you don't care anymore. Well, you know you should be doing that. Yeah, I know, I don't care. Now you're in trouble. And actually, at that point, you don't care. And I'm not being a wise guy. If you don't care, you just don't care. But as long as you care, I believe you'll be fine. As long as you're making the effort and it bothers you when you fail. Does that make sense? So hopefully that helps, because everybody loves to look for those verses. And again, I'm not picking on the person who asked the question. It's a common enough mindset that Christianity has instilled in everybody. You look at that verse and you go, oh, is that me? Did I do that? Am I doomed? Stop that. The fact that you're all worried about it means you're probably not doomed. Because you're worried, you're concerned, and you want to make sure you're not doing anything wrong. But don't beat yourself up when you fall short. All have fallen short. All have sinned. All are worthy of death. That's why we needed Yeshua to do what he did. Now we go back to Deuteronomy 8:2, where he says that he's leading us through this wilderness called life. He was talking about the Israelites in Egypt, but he led them out that wilderness to see our heart. And if your heart is to please him, if your heart is to do what's right, if your heart is to be upset when you fail, your heart is correct, your heart is right in that place, and I think you'll be fine. Okay? Only you know the effort you put in. So you put in the effort. But I fail all the time, Rabbi. So do I. What do you think? I'm not a human being like everybody else? All of us fail. And then you'll see somebody else that looks like they never fail. Well, they're just good at hiding it in public, or they just don't do things that are failures in public. Maybe they fail a ton at home by themselves. But we all fall short. Scripture tells us that. I believe what it says. Don't think everybody's doing better than you are. They're not. I know. I counsel almost everybody. Nobody's doing better than anybody. Okay? Promise you that. Some are just better at either hiding it in public or whatever they're struggling with, it just happens not to be a public thing. Nobody is struggling more than you are. Nobody. So be encouraged that everybody's on the same page. You all got the same struggle. It's called life. Life is hard, and apparently we all suck at it. Okay? I said that the other day. Life is the problem, and we all live in life. We live in the world. We're not of the world. This makes it hard. He told us that in John. We read that, Father. And in John 17, he says the same thing. He says, Father, I'm not praying that you take them out of the world, but they not be of the world. But in the world, he says, they hated me, they're going to hate you. Life will be tough trying to obey and follow his path. And that's the world we live in. It's designed to be against us. Not by the great designer, but the one in charge right now who's running around like a crazy being, instigating all kinds of problems. Encouraging everybody to do all their the base instincts of our flesh. And that's the world we're in. But in that world, if your heart's right, you'll make an effort. It won't always work, but you keep making the effort and keep making the effort. Just like you learned how to walk. Oh, you fell a ton. But you learned how to walk. Okay? Any other questions? Are we good? That was a good place to end then. That was good. All right, let's get the children from upstairs. Shabbat! We love you!